Across America, you're listening to the Veterans Impact Show, featuring stories of veterans who continue the mission in their communities with honor, courage, and commitment. Brought to you by Fairway Independent Mortgage Corporation and the Texas Veterans Chamber of Commerce. Well, good day. You're watching the Veterans Impact Show, and you're listening to the Veterans Impact Show. I'm Jim Blythe, U.S. Navy veteran. Joining me, Chuck Wright, U.S. Marine Corps. And he is a man who continues the mission in all that he does and all the wonderful things you do with veterans organizations. Chuck?
Charlie Mike, baby. And that's amazing because that first intro, I never know what you're going to say. And this time you said absolutely nothing. It was dead air. I'm not used to that from Jim. Yes, proudly wearing my UTSA Roadrunner shirt for all of our friends in South Texas on No Bull Radio.
Well, we want to thank those guys for being on board, and we want to thank the people watching in on the AUN network out in Northern California. Matter of fact, I just interviewed a whole bunch of Sea Cadets this last weekend, and two of them were from Santa Rosa, where one of the stations that broadcasts our program is located. I got to tell you, that was some of the most fun we've ever had, and that probably will be fed to AUN and broadcast in the next week or two.
Well, there we go. And before we really jump deep into the show, as you are prone to forget, I wanted to introduce the people behind the scenes. My friend Nathaniel, who's running Ascend podcast. Right? Okay, I got it right. I got it right this time. Our amazing production guy and our your much better half, the lovely Miss Diane Blythe, who's looking at me like, oh no, what's coming out of his mouth next, who makes sure we're out there on Facebook and on YouTube. And for those of you so the good news is we have doubled our number of YouTube subscribers. We have doubled it.
I think that's fantastic. And
the bad news is we're nowhere near the numbers we want to be. So
we're gonna
anybody listening, come subscribe to us on the YouTube channel.
That's important. Now, we have built teams over the years in doing various things. And one of the most important team members we've ever had is Colonel John Antal, the United States Army retired. And he is a leader and author. He'll be with us in just a second.
Best-selling author.
Absolutely. On Facebook. His nephew, Stephen Petreka, is here to join us. Stephen, good morning. Oh, I see Colonel Antal.
How are you today?
I am fantastic. Absolutely great. And whenever I get a chance to talk with John Antal, I am even better. Colonel Antal, your service to our nation, 30 years in the military, commanding tank corps. You were in Korea, you've been in Europe, all over the world. But what you are most known for as a best-selling author is your books about leadership. And you and I have talked so much about leadership, and you've been on our program so many times. I want people to know that Leadership Rising is your website. That's where people can go to find out a great deal about you. And then your new book, Leadership Rising, you're holding up for Facebook. Want people to go there and read that book. The books you have about leadership, which I see on the back in your bookcase, one of them is about the 7 lessons of leadership from D-Day. One of them is about the Revolutionary War. But, John, one of the most amazing things is I listened to a podcast this morning that you are working with the Army Futures Command. So I want to basically let you explain what you're doing and in service to our nation, how important this paying attention is, because we're faced with crises and problems that we've faced before and we bungled the ball. Way back when, in the 1940s, and I think in the Korean and Vietnam as well. So, John, I'm going to let you go and talk about how
That's the Korean and Vietnam Wars.
Yeah, how important what you're going to be talking about is.
Jim, thank you very much, and Chuck, it's good to see you guys this morning. Again, everyone who is listening, it's an honor to be on your show, and of course, it's great to have my nephew here, Stephen Petraka, who is a cadet at Texas A&M, and on his third year, he's going to be a junior, or is a junior now. So I'm very proud to have him here. My name is John Antal. My purpose in life is to develop leaders and inspire service. To develop leaders and inspire service. So what is your purpose? That's the question I ask all the time. And what I'm doing right now is, for the last 18 months, I've been working with our military, primarily the United States Army, to try to raise their awareness of the changing methods of warfare. So there are many things happening in the world. There's much technology that is changing how warfare is being fought. And my job, I see it as a soldier for life, and I don't charge for my services, is to provide them with an update on where this technology is changing warfare and how it affects us. So I've given over 116 presentations, which are about 90 minutes long, either in person or on MS Teams, since January 2021. So if you do the math there, that's at least one a week, sometimes two a week, and oftentimes I'm doing 3 a week. And I'm talking to everyone from the Chief of Staff of the Army to the Senate Armed Services Committee to general officers and their staffs, 3rd Corps at Fort Hood, Texas, places like the Top Gun School, the National Training Center of the U.S. Army, all the way down to Special Forces teams. And I just recently briefed an Air Force EOD team in Colorado. I briefed Marines in Japan, along with Japanese Defense Force officials. And so the message that I'm trying to get out is that we've really got to pay attention to the changing methods of warfare. And this is all about leadership. So it comes back to leadership. And how is this important to leadership? Well, either whether you're in business or whether you're in the military or any occupation you have, a nonprofit group, a church group, a family, you leaders have to have foresight. And foresight is a crucial skill. You don't just get it, you're not born with it, you have to learn to develop it. And foresight is the ability to solve problems in the short term and create solutions for the long run. Solve problems in the short term and create solutions for the long run. We desperately need leaders with foresight across the spectrum of our nation, from government to the military to businesses, across that whole spectrum and more. And you can develop foresight if you, in fact, read and study and understand your profession, understand your particular arena of activity, and then try to project your thoughts forward in time and space in several different ways, by a thought experiment, by thinking about it, or by red teaming with someone else. And red teaming is simply devil's advocate kind of thing. You play the bad guy, I play the good guy, or you play one side, I play the other side, and see how things would go. But thinking forward in time and space so you can get things done. So imagine if your family wants to go on a vacation and you have no foresight. You have not planned anything. You have not created where a location to stay at, a hotel room. You have not organized the cars right. You don't know where you're going to go when you get there. That makes you a pretty poor vacation planner. And usually someone will take over from that. So foresight involves that, but also thinking about how this fits into the next year and the next year and the next year. So foresight is something we really need, and that's one of the critical leadership skills that I teach when I talk to people across the country, CEOs and companies and teams, about how they can learn more about being a better leader and they can sharpen their leadership skills.
Now, John, I call that the 10,000-foot overview, is a way to take a look at things. So one of the things that you have written a book about is a little known, if not known at all, war. And your book, Leadership Rising, the 7 Seconds to Die, a military analysis of the second, I can't even pronounce it, in the future of warfighting. And it is a best-selling book. Here's the difference. What you're talking about is already happened, and the leadership lessons plus the leadership lessons of what we're learning that's going on in the Ukraine, and now what we're faced with in the South China Seas is going on. So these things repeat, and the 10,000-foot overview says, guess what? Neville Chamberlain, you screwed up way back when. You had all of the intel. You had all of the information that led up to World War II, and you lacked leadership completely. As a result, we ended up with a devastating World War. I think that what you're talking about is so imperative, and people need to understand this, because you can see what's coming, just as we could see what's coming in World War II and in Korea and in Vietnam. Now we're faced with a situation that I think is tremendously more dangerous than we've ever faced before.
Yeah, I totally agree. What happened was I've written 2 books in the last 12 months. One that came out in July, which is this one, Leadership Rising, which talks about how you can become a better leader, whether you're a veteran leader, in other words, a leader with a lot of experience, or whether you're an emerging leader. This tells you not from me how to be a leader. This tells you, because you have to do it, who you are.
Well,
and you have to define your leadership. And it makes you go into an introspective look as to what leadership is.
So I want to go off for just a second with you, John. I'm going to go off on a little bit of a tangent because I'm currently rereading one of my favorite series. It's historical fiction. But to me, when I look back on it, there is an element of, we all know Neville Chamberlain screwed up. But at the end of the day, what could Neville Chamberlain have done differently that would have prevented World War II? And I would argue not a damn thing. He could not have stopped what was already happening. This contrasts to the Korean War, where after World War II, Harry Truman made, and Lewis Johnson, his Secretary of Defense, made decisions which dramatically reduced the combat effectiveness of any of our troops. They made political decisions not to base troops in Korea, not to station troops in Korea, not to train troops in Korea. And yes, I get it. It's the war drawdown and all that. So to me, and I want your opinion of this, those are 2 huge contrasts. I don't see what Neville Chamberlain could have done. And if you want proof of that, look at Dunkirk. Germans literally kicked the British off of Europe, versus Truman, who literally stood up at one point and basically said our line of defense is Japan and the Philippines and Taiwan. And
right.
what you're
talking about is crucial. What if history is always a wonderful way to think through things, but
right.
No one can prove a what if. But what I would say is this: no matter what the time, be it 1940 with 1939, 1940 with Neville Chamberlain, or be it 1950 with Truman, or be it 2021, in Afghanistan. Leadership matters.
Absolutely.
Leadership matters. If a different leader had been in charge of the United Kingdom of Great Britain during the 1938, 1939, 1940 period, who knows how the situation would have changed.
Yes.
Had Winston Churchill been leading, the Great Britain, who knows? But leadership matters, and we know that. And so the reason that I wrote that book, 7 Seconds to Die, the study of the Nagorno-Karabakh War, and people go, Nagorno-Karabakh, where the heck is that? Well, there's a country called Azerbaijan and a country called Armenia, and they went to war. The bottom line is that they fought a war that we need to study. And it gives us the ability to look at a glimpse of future warfare. So I wrote this book, and it came out in February 2022, just a week and a half before the Russian invasion of Ukraine. And everything that I wrote in that book is playing out in Ukraine, only at a different scale. So the question is, how do you gain foresight? And the way you gain foresight is you study and you read and you go deep and you develop these case studies, and then you figure out lessons learned.
Now, John, we're going to go for a break for our commercial radio. In talking about that, what I want to come back to is we had all of the signals. You and I and Chuck went to all of those briefings that we had, and they were talking about what was going to happen in Ukraine before it happened. We saw it coming. We see it now in Taiwan. It's real obvious. So when we come back, we want to dig deeper into that. And then I want to talk with Stephen about, service. You were a cadet down at the University of A&M, which is great. And I got to tell you, I want to find out a little bit more about what you're doing and how you want to serve. But right now, let's take a break for our commercial radio audience. This is Jim Blythe and Chuck Wright and Colonel John Antal with the Veterans Impact Show.
And just so everybody knows, we are going to remain live on Facebook. Plus, you'll be able to, what are we calling it? Live or Memorex? That's
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, Stephen is way too young to remember the Live or Memorex commercials, but but basically, you'll be able to watch us on YouTube. Actually, you'll be able to watch us on Facebook too. Pop on our channel, like us, follow us, subscribe on YouTube. All you got to do is click a button. It doesn't do anything. We don't send you any crazy emails or anything like that, but it just lets us know who is out there. And I've got some interesting questions for Stephen coming up, but John, you were talking about this war in a kind of a short synopsis. What is it that you see? Because I want to pull this back to the leadership story, because this is, to me, what is most important for our nonprofits, for our businesses, and certainly for our veterans. Quick synopsis of what about this war caused you to say that's what we need to pay attention to?
Right. In any endeavor, no matter what you do in life, if you know about what you're doing and you study what's going on, you're better prepared for what's happening. You're more aware. Raising your awareness is crucial. We had a war in 2020 that occurred between Armenia and Azerbaijan. This war was a very short war, 44 days of war, where the Armenians held the high ground. They basically had created a Maginot Line in the mountains, bunkers, defensive positions, in-depth wire and mines. And the Azerbaijanis overcame them in 44 days, irregardless of the terrain, and with lower casualties than were inflicted on the Armenians. And it was the first war in history won primarily by robotic systems.
Whoa. Now, also...
So here we go with a decisive war in 44 days, a war that was leveraging to the maximum the robotic systems of the time, the latest Israeli and Turkish kit that they could buy, because Azerbaijan had money from their oil wealth. Armenia, not so much. They used old Russian Soviet stuff. And both of these were former Soviet socialist republics, so they both had that background and that military training. But the Azerbaijanis have been studying with Turkey and with NATO and becoming more westernized, and they fought a more Western war with the latest kit, and they won the war primarily using their unmanned aerial vehicles, loitering munitions, unmanned combat aerial vehicles, and a whole slew of long-range precision fires, to include long-range precision anti-tank guided missiles. And all of these systems had streaming video that saw the battle space as they flew through the air. Most of it was connected, and the Azerbaijanis were able to use this streaming video to find out what the enemy was doing, what the Armenians were set up like. It showed them what their positions looked like. It gave them a battle damage assessment when they hit the target, and then they were using that stuff later on, hours later, on social media to help win the information war. So their ability to do this in a first-class way, they fought a joint multi-domain campaign against their enemy.
You know, when we come back, we want to get into that and talk about that. I think that's a brilliant question.
Well, and I also want to take that sounds like it's very war and military focused, but I want to bring that into business. I want to bring that into the nonprofit space. And
right.
we're coming back for commercial radio.
Welcome back to the Veterans Impact Show. Thanks to our great sponsors, Fairway Independent Mortgage Corporation and the Texas Veterans Chamber of Commerce. Now, let's continue this conversation. We're on board this morning with Colonel John Antal, U.S. Army retired leader, best-selling author, teacher, a man who really serves this nation and going out right now in discussing and getting in front of the major military leaders and saying, look, we've got to make a change. And he's written a great book, Leadership Rising. John, you want to hold that up again? This is Colonel John Antal, and joining his nephew, Stephen Petraka. And thank you guys for being on board.
Move that a little right. We need to cover Stephen up.
Yeah.
No, I'm just kidding with that. You gotta understand, Stephen.
And Stephen is a cadet at Texas A&M, and I'm very proud to have him with us on the show because I thought it would be very useful to see what emerging leaders think and act like today.
Well, I'll tell you what, I'm all in because we're heavily involved with Sea Cadets and Young Marines. This is important. Let's go back, though, for just a second, because while we were on Facebook, we were talking about in this war that happened between Azerbaijan and
You got it better than I did.
I'm having a hard time.
And Armenia.
I can help you with
Okay,
that. I can help you with that.
Okay, so basically, to summarize, one country used the latest technology, robotics. You were talking about that. They also were using the satellites and providing imagery so nobody could hide. And they won this war in 44 days using the latest of today's technology. A point you made to me is there is nothing invisible anymore. The command center, troop movements, aircraft, we've seen this in the Ukraine. I mean, just regular commercial satellite pictures show where everything is.
Yeah, you've got Google Earth and you've got all that. But John, and I think this is, or at least I think it is, the point you're really driving at is what you were explaining. And yes, it was a technological approach, or a more modern approach versus a more static traditional defense of one country. But it was exercising the leadership and the vision to say, what can we do that will counter their strengths? And I wanted you to talk about the leadership aspect of that and how it would apply to, because we've got people listening going, well, how does that apply to my nonprofit or my business?
Right. Now, that's a great question, and making it relevant to all of us is important. So what I did was I studied this war as it was ongoing in 2020 and realized that I had to write about it. So I wrote articles about it, and then I realized I started briefing about it. Then I realized I had to write a book about it because 10 years from now, it won't matter. We have got to learn these lessons fast, and we've got to learn them as deep as we can with what we have. And everything that I did was open source, so anyone could have put this book together had they done the same kind of research. And that's where this comes in a parallel way in everything that you do in life. In everything that you do in life, if you do the proper research and preparation, and you do the thinking through that what it takes and what if drills and what could happen if things went this way and things went that way, and get someone to play the red team for you, to act as if, for instance, if the opponent, or in many cases in a company, a competitor, another product is going to compete against your product, how will that play out? And you can think through that. And it doesn't take any great simulation, but it takes thinking. So all of this happens in your head. All of this involves your heart and your soul, your whole concept of leadership. And again, foresight is the critical task that everyone is skilled, that everyone, as a leader, we want. We don't want leaders who cannot see around the corner and always drop us off the cliff. We want leaders that have foresight, the ability to solve problems in the short term, fix the problems right now, and provide solutions for the long run, so that we're moving on a good path. That's the kind of leader you want to follow. You don't want to follow a leader who, again, doesn't know what's going on and drops you off the cliff, or causes chaos after chaos after chaos and problem after problem after problem, because eventually you stop following that kind of a leader.
Right.
Well, let's put it to a practical thing. I'm in the mortgage business. A number of mortgage companies are going bankrupt right now and shutting down and laying people off simply because they didn't see the signs that we all saw a year or so ago, rising interest rates. Their business model was based upon low interest rates and refinances. The net result is they're out of business, and a lot of people are unemployed. If they had changed what they were doing within the parameters and had looked down the road, I mean, you could see a thunderstorm coming with a tornado cloud. Get the heck out of the way. All right.
Yeah, precisely right. Precisely right. And that only comes when leaders, because leadership matters, when leaders pay attention to what's going on. So in the case of, go ahead.
All right, we're going to take another break, and we'll be right back. Facebook, stay with us. We're continuing this conversation with Colonel John Antal and his nephew, Stephen Petragia. What a fabulous opportunity to learn. You want to go to Leadership Rising and get everything you can.
Yeah, leadershiprising.net.
You bet. And so we're going to be right back. This is the Veterans Impact Show.
it's amazing to me because I see it all the time. And John, I was going to tell you the expression I learned in the Marine Corps was, don't get married to the solution. And in this example, the Armenians were very married to the solution. And it was the internal, I'm right, you're wrong, we're going to do things the way we've always done things, whereas the
The
other guys said,
Yeah.
hey, wait a minute, we've got this technology. We can use this technology without risking our people. We'll spend some oil money because we got some oil money, and there's nothing wrong with having money. But they use the technology to create both a tactical and ultimately a strategic advantage over their counterparts.
Colonel Antal, the podcast that I listened to this morning, which was phenomenal. I told you that I went and ran and I got my helmet on and got under the desk after reading it because it was so powerful. That's on a deal called the Mad Scientist Laboratory.
Right.
Is that where we find that podcast?
Yeah, exactly right. Just go to Army Futures Command Mad Scientist and put in John Antal, and you'll get two podcasts. One, which I made last year, about how weapons are turning to top attack. Everything's attacking from the top now, not from the horizontal or the bottom. I mean, everything will happen, 360 attack, but top attack is the preferred method of war. And now this second one, which came out Tuesday, which is all about the changing methods of war and how we need to learn how to adapt our command and control capabilities in order to survive and win in this environment.
And I think whether you're talking about military or you're talking about the veterans 501c3s or businesses, whether it's Walmart, take a look at what's happened. They have been attacked and they've lost. Basically, how many malls have we closed? Sears, which was the biggest retailer in the United States.
At one point, yeah.
No longer there.
Yeah, I think Sears is still there as a company, but it is shrunk. Whereas Amazon is one of the largest companies in the world.
Right. And when change happens like that, you have to adapt, improvise, and overcome. And so companies that are able to foresee that can set themselves up so they can win in the short term and also win in the long run. But if you don't have that foresight, then you end up being surprised all the time, which is one of the challenges we have with the United States of America with basic intelligence information. You know, since Pearl Harbor, we can list the number of times we've been surprised. And it gets to be a little bit depressing because it would be really nice to be able to nip some of these problems in the bud before they happen.
Well, the one thing I will say is that the only times we do hear about that is when it goes wrong. They don't broadcast when it goes right.
Well, and a lot of times they're only interested in talking about what keeps them in office or keeps them in power. So, John, we're going to be coming right back in about 15 seconds. Stephen, thank you, brother, for being with us. We're going to be talking about then next the service. So stand by, Facebook.
Fantastic. I'm excited to talk about it.
All right. Welcome back to the Veterans Impact Show. Thanks to our great sponsors, Fairway Independent Mortgage Corporation and the Texas Veterans Chamber of Commerce. Now, let's continue this conversation. Well, we're here today on board with Colonel John Antal and his nephew, Stephen Petreka. Stephen, you're an A&M student. I believe you said you're a junior and you're in the Corps. That is a very rare thing today because a lot of people stay clear of the military. But you've jumped in, and I think the Texas A&M Corps and being a cadet is one of the most important things. You have the opportunity to go to the Army, the Marine Corps, the Navy, Air Force, whatever you want to do, but you have a leadership skill that you're developing down there that is military, but it will relate over into business. So, Stephen, what caused you to want to go into the Corps? I mean, it's not the most popular thing in college today.
You're right, and it should be, Mr. Jim. But first of all, I want to say thank you to you and thank you to my uncle, and it's a pleasure to be here and talk about service for the Republic, right? So what caused me to go to the Corps? As a citizen of America, right, I see it as a duty for me to do service to the country. So going into the Corps was one of those options, and the option that I have presented to me is the Army. Sorry, Mr. Jim, but go Army, beat Navy, hooah. That's just
Gesundheit, by the way.
Take. Right, so my family's 4 generations of service, and being able to be a cadet in the Corps gives me leadership opportunities that allows me to be something greater than myself. Right, so it's always about being something greater than myself, and being in the Corps, being in an opportunity to serve the country is something that I really want to do and pursue.
I think that's outstanding. And your uncle, who's really more like your grandfather, I tell you,
yeah, man.
He has been a leader.
Great. That's the last time we've got John on the show. Thanks a lot, Jim.
No, so let's continue the conversation, though, about leadership and how it relates in the business world. And your book, Leadership Rising, is like your other books about leadership, is so provocative and so important. Again, what we want to go back to, though, is the podcast that you're doing for the Army Futures Command. If you want to hear them, go to the Army Futures Command, go to the Mad Scientist, and check on John Antal, and you're going to be able to hear.
Jim is our own version of the Mad Scientist. I have no idea where you're going. In fact, before we do that, before we go back to that, Stephen, do you have, or when will you decide what path you want to go into in the Army? And to explain that for those who don't know, the Army has the infantry, the Army has the armor division, they have the artillery, they have all these different, what would you call it? Branches.
Right. Yeah.
You have branches inside a branch of the service. So talk a little bit about that. Where are your interests right now? Are you going to follow your uncle and be an armor officer? Where do you see that? Do you want to be a fine helicopter pilot like our favorite Marine on the show?
So unfortunately, no, aviation is not my goal, Mr. Chuck. I want to apologize, but being an armor officer is fantastic. I mean, you get to be in a heated vehicle the whole time, but I think the route for me is being an engineer. I'd like to be a sapper. Those guys are some of the toughest guys I've ever met. But also being an engineer in the Army has so many paths, so many opportunities. They can go to any base. They have the ability to be the tip of the spear, go out there, destroy obstacles, create obstacles for our soldiers. Or they have the ability to pursue education paid by the Army, God bless, and be able to build horizontal and vertically, create structures and do civil service while in the Army. So I want to be an engineer in the Army because it has so many opportunities, and it's just a great chance for me to pursue what I want.
Now, is your degree from A&M going to be in engineering, structural or civil engineering, or just engineering?
Yes, it is. It's called industrial distribution. It is a engineering degree. It is a bachelor's of science. The other engineers, though, don't like my degree because after 2 years of studying regular engineering, your physics, your calculus, your chemistry, it branches off into the study of logistics and business. So the other engineers really call me a fake engineer. But hey, it's a science. It's a bachelor of science, and I love it. And I'm having a fantastic time there.
Well, let me tell you something. Having been in the Navy, when the supply ship showed up, everybody paid attention and got on board. If you run out of food, ammunition, fuel, whatever, you're going to find out what the most important job in the military is, and it's logistics, right, John?
That's right.
Well,
Exactly right.
I was going to say, John, you can do hours of talking about Napoleon lost his war in Russia because of a lack of logistics. And you could look in throughout history how many times and how critical logistics was to every war that has been fought.
Well, let's take a look at what's going on in Ukraine right now. Many of the things that I have seen have said the Russians were not prepared. They thought they were going to have this quick and welcome with roses and open arms, and they didn't have the logistics to maintain what's going on. Is that not true?
No, that is true in the opening phases. The war isn't over yet, and we still have to see how this turns out. In the past, the Russians have always started badly, but they've always ground through and continued on, so we'll see. But, yeah, exactly right. There's a saying that amateurs study tactics and professionals study logistics. But what's interesting from my study of the Second Nagorno-Karabakh War, which happened again in 2020, where Azerbaijan beat Armenia in 44 days, decisive victory, the first war in history, primarily won by unmanned systems, by robotic systems. And also what's happening in Ukraine and what's happening in Taiwan. Masking is very important. The ability to hide your forces in both the optical, the thermal, the electronic, the acoustic, and the quantum levels. So what's happening in the 21st century, because of the changing methods of war, is that amateurs may study tactics and professionals may study logistics, but a master of the art of war in the 21st century understands tactics, understands logistics, and understands how to mask his forces. And being able to mask, being able to deceive the enemy and disrupt their targeting, deceive their sensors and disrupt their targeting is crucial. It's not being invisible, it's the active effort, the multi-domain full effort to deceive their sensors and disrupt their targeting. That's what masters of the art of war today need to understand. So what does this mean to you as anyone listening to this who's not a soldier, airman, Marine? What it means is that if you study your area of expertise, if you study the area that you really are working in, and you in-depth understand where the trends are going and start trying to connect those dots, you can develop this foresight we've been talking about, the ability to solve problems in the short term and create solutions for the long run, and you can become a better leader.
Without a doubt, we can see through the fog what's going on. We could see malls closing. We could see these stores like Sears having a problem, and their leadership fell apart completely. Fell apart completely.
Yeah.
Sears, if you think go back to Sears as a good example, they were the leader in the most innovative forms of marketing and distribution. It was called the Sears Catalog.
Right, and that was the initial Amazon.
That was it.
In the turn of the century, 1900s. I mean, the other century.
Well, let's go to another.
Yeah.
Let's go to another one.
Jim, you're exactly right, particularly in the mortgage business.
Yeah.
Now, imagine the housing industry right now. In China, the housing industry is collapsing. I mean, you're going to see in the next couple of weeks unbelievable reports from China of bank closings, of company failures, of the housing bubble has collapsed. And that is going to reverberate across the globe. Now, we know right now housing is overpriced, that we have a housing issue. So people in the mortgage industry need to really study this, understand the trends, and be able to advise their clients in ways where they show foresight. So those people can not only solve their short-term problem, but be set up for success in the long run and not be wiped out. And that's going to be really crucial. So we see this happening now. It's just like 2008 on steroids. And what are the leaders doing about it?
One of the things, I'm in the mortgage business. I lived through 2008. In 2006, I predicted what was going to happen simply by listening to the marketing of the subprime lenders and reading the documents. The documents guaranteed to fail. There was a default provision. So you could see it coming. At that time, I jumped into doing reverse mortgage lending because I could also see my generation has had the biggest impact and the most need. And so what I started in 2006 in working in reverse goes with the trend of aging in America. One of the things that we found is 95% of the people out there don't have any income other than Social Security. And maybe they've got a home. And so we've got
He's talking about 95% of the people who are in or at retirement.
In or at retirement. So we've got to work with financial advisors like Chuck and find hidden sources of money and help people with budgeting, which is the big thing that Chuck is strong about. These are the trends in the mortgage industry that are going to make my company, Fairway, work where other companies are closing like,
And John, to your point, and it's extremely well stated today, housing starts in America, which is, there's the big debate right now is, are we actually in a recession? And the big argument is because the current administration is not going to admit there's a problem. No matter how bad the problem is, they just are going to refuse to admit it. And they're trying to say, oh, but look at employment numbers. Well, okay, that's fine. But one of the biggest drivers of recession or non-recession is looking at housing starts. How many new homes are being built? And in America, that's fallen close to zero. It was going crazy, and so we're already seeing in some markets a softening of, you made the comment that housing is overvalued right now. And generally that is a strong indicator of a potential bubble that's going to pop. So the signs are there. The question is, and this goes back to your book, what are you doing and what are the steps? And this, I'm trying to set up a question and I'm not doing it very well. Would you talk a little bit about how in your book, a lot of the stuff you're saying is very esoteric. We understand, you say the 10,000 foot view, I say the 30,000 foot view. The problem is we have this view, we know what we want to accomplish. What your book talks about is how the nuts and bolts, the steps to get there. And so I'll shut up. John, I'll let you answer. Talk a little bit, give us a tease of how the book talks about getting there.
Yeah, very good, Chuck. Thank you. I mean, leadership matters. And if you think leadership makes a difference, then you need to raise the awareness of your leadership. So let's just talk the housing issue for just a very short line of thought here. If in fact we see there are big troubles in the globe right now with housing, the Chinese market is collapsing, and we know that those effects are going to be global, that everyone's going to be affected by that eventually, and the housing market in the United States right now is a challenge, and we can foresee some of that. It doesn't matter that you see it and say, see, I knew it was happening. Mm-hmm. That doesn't matter. Right. What matters is that you act. You see, leaders have a bias for action. They don't sit around and let things happen. They prepare and they get ready to solve the problem. And that's one of the things I talk about in Leadership Rising. Raise your awareness of leadership by understanding who you are, understanding with sharp definition the key aspects of leadership, and then use all of that to become a better leader. And then how do you act in time? Yep. How do you act in time to make a difference? Because if you're Neville Chamberlain and a wonderful fellow, but you make all the bad decisions, it doesn't matter. Right. You have to decide and make good decisions in time. And for those of you that don't know who Neville Chamberlain was, he was the United Kingdom, the Prime Minister of Great Britain, and during the time when Adolf Hitler was threatening the world, and he believed Hitler was a good man, and Herr Hitler wouldn't cause a war. So when you have leaders that totally misjudge the situation, bad things can happen. The more we have leaders who are aware, who study what they're doing, who go in depth into their areas and really know the subject matter and where the trends are going and can project their thoughts forward in time and space, that's the kind of leader you want to follow. And it's all about character, competencies, and commitment.
Another good example has been with the pandemic. There was one restaurant that absolutely became unbelievably sterling, and that's the Chick-fil-A. They had built up a tremendous system for being able to do drive-through, people to do drive-through. I was up in Oklahoma, and I was going to grab a quick lunch and go through a Chick-fil-A, and I couldn't get near the place because the block was all the way down the street. And they saw the trend coming for takeout, and it made all the difference in the world. And they have led the way in the fast food industry and restaurant industry.
Yeah, a simple example of leadership, and you can see them across industries that succeed and fail. I mean, you look at Elon Musk and you see leadership in so many different arenas, and you see how he's able to do things that no one else can do. I mean, for instance, if we asked the U.S. government to create a rocket booster that would launch, get the ship into outer space, and then land on its own, it would have taken 100 years.
Yeah, and he went out and did it. Anybody could have done it if they had the drive and the passion in doing it. And I tell you what, you've got the drive and passion to teach us leadership. So we're going to be right back. And Facebook, stay with us as we wrap this up. Thank you for being on board. Thank you for being part of the Veterans Impact Show.
Out here on Facebook, we've got about 10 minutes left in the show. It has been fast and it has been furious. We have learned that young Master Stephen is going to be an engineer. We like that, with a focus on logistics, and I can assure you I'm a big believer in that, and I am sure you are going to have a fine future. Now, I've got to ask this question as you're on the show with a couple of, one with a Texas alum and another with a Texas fan. What drove you to A&M? Was it the Corps of Cadets? Was it the engineering program? Or was it your uncle kind of saying, go down here?
No. Of course, my uncle wanted me to go down there, but my influence to attend Texas A&M University, Gig'em, is because the people there, first of all, are all patriots. I mean, what a fantastic school to be with, fantastic place to be surrounded by other people who have drive and motivation to go out there, be a go-getter, and be successful, right? And of course, the Corps of Cadets has amazing training for future military cadets. I mean, I'm down there in a leadership laboratory every day, learning about my profession, learning how to be a successful soldier, a successful officer, a successful leader in the future. So all of those reasons combined is the reason why I went to Texas A&M. I mean, it's just words cannot express being an Aggie, truly.
I think that's important, because a quality of education is not just the academics. It's all of the immersion. And basically, by being a part of the Corps, you are immersed in all of that, which is military, but military also leads the way in leadership. Correct, John?
Yeah, and none of this was given to Stephen. Stephen earned this. He earned the ROTC scholarship by competing with thousands of other people so that he could go to this school. He's earned other scholarships in order to be there. He doesn't have the money to pay for this college on his own. And
you mean his rich uncle's not picking up the bill?
No, we don't want to talk about how much his uncle's picking up, but we do want to say that for sure he's earned it.
Yeah.
And so what counts is that if you want to do something, do it.
Yep.
The challenge we have is that too many people worry about what they can't do.
Yes.
I tell everyone, don't tell me what you can't do. Tell me what you can do. Emphasize what you can do. Make what you can do greater. And by the way, have an attitude of gratitude so that you understand that you're blessed. You live in a time right now.
I love that expression.
You live in an era where you have the opportunity to do so much. You could have been born in China. You could have been born in Russia. God forbid you're in the middle of Ukraine right now in a war. Here you are in the United States of America. And we're complaining? Yeah, there's things we need to get better. Absolutely. But you make them better. Don't ask someone else to do it for you. Do it.
Absolutely. And that is the entire focus. The motto of the show is Charlie Mike, continue the mission. Stephen, you are at the leading edge, if you will, as opposed to like Jim and I were kind of more on the trailing edge and trying to share that story. But continuing that mission, you're just starting that mission. But it is absolutely critical, and one of the things we hope to do is to inspire more people, more young people, to follow your path, if you will.
Without a doubt, because it's a path that leads to success in life. And just remember this, thoughts held in mind produce in kind. When you are focused on the positives of leadership and the positives of going forward, you're going to get there. If you're focused on the back, what is so negative, you're going to get there too. All right, we're going to be right back after these introductions. Welcome back to the Veterans Impact Show. Thanks to our great sponsors, Fairway Independent Mortgage Corporation and the Texas Veterans Chamber of Commerce. Now, let's continue this conversation. Well, Chuck, we have had a fabulous conversation today with Colonel John Antal and his son, nephew. I'm sorry. I do think there is a great family resemblance, though.
I don't know. One of them has hair and the other doesn't.
Well, let's put
more efficient.
Much more efficient. Much more efficient.
Stephen, just think of what you have to look forward to.
And
exciting all the time.
The next generation, that's what it's all about, and leadership. So I want to go back real quick to wrap up. Colonel Antal, you are
the author
of Leadership Rising. You're author of a number of leadership books. You're a best-selling author. It's important so people can go to your website, Leadership Rising, and find out .net and find out all about it. Effective training. One of the things is you're doing a lot of training right now for the Army Futures Command, for the Army. I hope the Navy gets into it. But, boy, you should have been training Sears Roebuck and a number of other companies over the last 10 or 15 years, because I think you could have made a huge difference.
Well, another example
at Leadership Rising, we also coach, teach, and mentor companies, CEOs, teams. So any company that wants to raise the awareness of their team, of their company, of their organization should contact us at leadershiprising.net, and we can figure out a way to make your teams more effective, raising their awareness so they can be better leaders and develop leaders with foresight.
So let's talk about the problem right quick. The problem is America and the world is staring into the teeth of a recession. Now, will it be a bad one like 2008? Will it be a soft one like, I'm trying to think off the top of my head, I can't think of anything.
74, 75.
Yeah, so something like that. Not everybody is that old, but that's okay. We try to have a little bit of fun, but the point of it is, and this is where John Antal's message of Leadership Rising, go to the website, but if you're not necessarily ready to jump in and have him come consult the company, read the book Leadership Rising, and I think you will see, yeah, this is the kind of person we need to have come in, and this is the time. Because one of the things it's one of the lessons that I learned way back, believe it or not, in college. Success in business often masks management problems. And this is the point in time, and John's program and John's book talks about making sure, and your partner, J.P. Hogan, another retired Army armor officer, friend of the show as well, used to talk about his concept of North Star. And that's what when you say foresight, I instantly think of North Star. And what JP is talking about is, where's that vision? Where am I going to take this company, this organization? What you are doing is you are providing the how. How do I get it there? I know I want to do this. I know we're facing turbulent times, and JP has done this, and I always think of a ship on the ocean. And the example that he gave is you take out of New York, you're heading for Portsmouth, England, and you've made all the right tactical decisions along the way because of weather, because of this, because of that, and lo and behold, you wind up in France.
Ouch. Well, guys, listen, this has been great.
Oh, sure.
Colonel Antal, I want to bring you back to talk about the Pacific Theater because you are an expert in that area. So let's plan that and put that together because I think we need to focus on what's going over there.
We didn't even talk about Taiwan.
Happy to do so.
All right. I'd like to close with a prayer. Dear Lord, I thank you for the protection of all of our active duty military and first responders as they protect us around the world and watch over and take care of us. Thank you, O Lord, for being there for us. Thank you for our veterans, and thank you for men like Colonel Antal who provide leadership. Let us learn from the past. Let us be futuristic and look forward. Let us see where the next war is going to be, whether it's in Wall Street or in the Pacific or in the East. So, Lord, thank you for being our bulwark and our strength. This we pray. Thank you in God's name. John.
And if I could add, God bless all friends and confusion to all enemies.
I like it.
I like that. Guys, this has been a fabulous program with tremendous information. Subscribe to YouTube. Take a look at this. This is important information. Take a look at John's book. And thank you, Stephen, for being part of our program as well. It's a blast to have a young guy like you and see leadership effectively growing.
Well, thank you, Mr. Jim.
There we go. Look forward to watching your success in the future, Stephen. Thank everybody for being here. Like Jim said, find the Veteran Impact Show on YouTube. Subscribe. Everybody have a great week.
Thank you for being on board. This was the Veterans Impact Show.
Cool. Army strong.
By the way, guys,